Today on Blue 58, the Packers' 2024 schedule is out, and it looks like a fascinating menu of future football. Let's dig in.
Blue 58!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Blue 58, the one and only podcast of thepowersweep.com. I am your host, John Meerdink, and I am happy to be with you here for another episode. And what an episode we have ahead of us. After months and months of teasing, we finally have the full 2024 Green Bay Packers schedule. But first, a couple roster moves we've got to talk about, then a question related to some goings-on with the Packers. First, undrafted free agent Trente Jones has retired. Didn't even get a chance to say his roster or his name right as a member of the Green Bay Packers, but he's done. Injury-related stuff. Honestly, not too surprising. Football's a tough game, man. And people wear out, and you just maybe don't want to put your body through that where you're at right now. Reading some of his online stuff, it sounds like he's not against the idea of coming back at some point. Maybe that happens a year from now, 2 years from now, who knows. Maybe it never happens. He just decides that life outside of football is fine, and he gets to take his degree, multiple degrees from the University of Michigan, and say, we're doing all right here. But he is retired, opening the door for Spencer Waege. I'm not really sure how you say his name because I've seen it conflicting ways and heard it conflicting ways at different sites. So we'll just go with that. So a big guy, 6'5", 295 pounds, played at North Dakota State, a teammate of Christian Watson's for a while, for 5 seasons, in fact, and spent a little bit of time with the San Francisco 49ers, fairly good athlete, another big body up front. I think that's all we need to say about the move right now, unless he starts making real moves in OTAs and training camp, which is not that far off. We are moving rapidly through the offseason, already the middle of May. And then I just wanted to mention this one. Normally wouldn't care about this, but Robert Tonyan, the former Green Bay Packers tight end, has signed with the Minnesota Vikings, and that is significant to me because he has now completed the NFC North Tour. He started his career as a undrafted free agent signing with the Detroit Lions, of course had a nice run with the Green Bay Packers there for a few years, played recently with the Chicago Bears, and now is a member of the Minnesota Vikings. He's done it all, filled up the passport as far as NFC North teams go, so good for Robert continuing to extend his playing career, and all the best to him, I suppose, in Minnesota. Also going on in Green Bay, the Packers are signing a bunch of their draft picks. In fact, of their 11 draft picks so far, only 3 remained unsigned. Well, not so far. That's all the 11 picks that we're going to get this year. But 3 of the 11 are still unsigned. 8 are already done. The 3 remaining, Jordan Morgan, Edgerrin Cooper, and Javon Bullard, their top 3 picks, and those are the most significant contracts, especially Morgan's with 5th-year option. But we got a question in our Discord server. Alex and Alexandria offered this one up. Ignorant question, he says. It's not. No question is really ignorant. If you don't know, you don't know. What's with the stories about rookies signing their contracts? Other than pure holdouts for someone that doesn't want to play for a team, what actual negotiating room is there for these contracts? Not an ignorant question, a very good one. There really is no negotiating room anymore. The era of taking a long time to hammer out a rookie deal is done. It just does not exist anymore because of how these contracts are slotted and structured within the collective bargaining agreement. And this has basically been a settled deal since the 2011 collective bargaining agreement. They moved a bunch of money. Essentially what happened on the players' side of that CBA negotiation is they moved a bunch of the money that was going to rookies and just tried to move it into the middle class of NFL contracts. So these are your lower end or mid-tier roster players that are up for like second contracts. That's where they wanted the money to go. They always figured that the super duper stars are going to get their money, but those guys in the middle were getting squeezed out by rookies who were taking up a bunch of the salary cap. Look back at like contracts for, say, Sam Bradford off the top of your head. He's one of the highest earners in NFL history, in large part because of that rookie contract that he signed. And, prior to that, you can go and look back at a bunch of other guys that got a ton of money up front just because of where they were drafted. Not really the case anymore because contracts are basically slotted in. The only thing that sometimes becomes an issue, and it's becoming less and less of an issue because more and more guys, especially in the first round, are getting fully guaranteed contracts for their first 4 years, then the 5th-year option becomes is always fully guaranteed if that's picked up as well. But the only thing that becomes a little bit of a hang-up in some of these contract negotiations is something called offset language, and here's how that works. Say, just as a for instance, this is not related to the draft, but let's say you signed a 3-year, $30 million contract that is fully guaranteed. After your first 2 years, in which they've paid you $20 million, they cut you, the team, whatever it is, for whatever reason. You played your music too loud in their locker room, let's just say for this example. Your contract's fully guaranteed, so they still owe you $10 million. No matter what, you're going to get $10 million. But the offset language is about what happens and who pays that last $10 million if you sign with somebody else. If you don't have offset language in your contract, you're going to get your $10 million from your original team regardless. With offset language, what your original team pays is going to depend on what happens with your next team. Say with these $10 million guaranteed, if you have offset language in your contract, if you sign a 1-year, $4 million deal with a new team, your original team is then only on the hook for $6 million. It just has to add up to the $10 million, but some of the obligation to your original team is offset by your new contract. Guys don't want the offset language. They just want to get paid whatever they're going to get paid, regardless. They want the $10 million you're going to get from your original team plus whatever they get from a new team. They're not getting stuff on top of their original deal. It's just who's going to pay the difference. Guys with that offset language, sometimes you'll see if they get cut in a situation where their original team is going to owe them X amount of money regardless, or not regardless, they're going to owe them X amount of money that's going to be canceled out by that new contract. They'll just sign for the minimum deal with whoever because they don't want to put the onus on their new team and potentially hinder them from signing with somebody they really want to go to. So they'll sign for the minimum, and then the original team is still on the hook for the millions of dollars because the original team wants to get out from under that contract however they can. So that's really the only stuff that you see negotiating about, or guys negotiating about anymore, and it's happening less and less. Some teams have just never worried about it at all, but you do see it as a hang-up from time to time. It's never really anything that's going to keep guys away from teams or slow anything down like we used to see in the old days. It's getting to be a long time ago now, 13 years ago since the 2011 CBA. So it's getting to be a long, long time. So not an ignorant question, something you do see happening from time to time, and that's something that you, I guess, should be aware of. And the Packers, of course, are getting these contracts done pretty quickly. Only those three remain, Morgan, Cooper, and Bullard. What it seems like to me is Russ Ball is focusing on the relatively easy stuff rather than doing the big deals. I'm projecting onto him because that's what I find myself doing sometimes at work. I've got a couple big things to do, or I've got like 8 small things on the to-do list. Let's do the 8 small things so we feel productive, and we also get to get away from the big things that are really going to take up a lot of time. We could do those another time. We can make that future John's problem. This can be future Russ's problem. Extensions for Jordan Love and maybe for Kenny Clark. We don't have to worry about those. We got to focus on the rookie class right now, and we're going to pound out these deals, which are not difficult at all because they're all slotted in anyway. But that's how that all works. Before we talk about the schedule, I want to take a second and pitch you again on the idea of our Patreon and Substack. These are ways that you can support Blue 58 and the Power Sweep, and something I forgot to mention the last time around, in addition to the bonus content, in addition to the merch that you get for supporting via Patreon and via Substack, one of the most important aspects of this is you help me keep this whole operation ad-free. Now, this is not me holding you hostage. This is not, I don't ever want this to come across as me threatening to say, someday we're going to have ads on Blue 58, or we're going to run ads at thepowersweep.com if you don't support the show. It's never going to happen. However, it's intentionally cutting off a potential revenue stream. And there have been people that have approached me about advertising on Blue 58, except it is almost always one of 3 categories of people. Company, product, put it that way. The first is various little blue pills. Think Cialis. No more needs to be said about that. We talk about performance-enhancing drugs on this show from time to time. It's part of sports. That is not the kind of performance-enhancing drug I want to talk about on the show. The second is very aggressive male grooming products, various scaped and shaved and things of that nature. It's not something I care to talk about on the podcast, so I'm not going to take their money. The third thing is gambling. Gambling ads. I bet not a week goes by. Sometimes it's multiple times a week where I get a pitch in my inbox. Somebody's like, hey, do you want to pitch this gambling product? And the answer is always a really easy no. No, I don't want to be a part of that industry. So if you agree with that approach, one of the things that you can do to help support the show and help us keep doing the things that we're doing is supporting via Patreon, patreon.com/thepowersweep, or Substack, thepowersweep.substack.com. Help us just by giving whatever you feel comfortable giving, whether it's $1 a month, $3 a month, $5 a month, or annual stuff. It saves you a little bit of money doing it that way. It just help us keep those kind of ads away from the show. It's just the ultimate incentive to do it, something I wouldn't do anyway. But just you can help us keep that process going and help, I guess, support with your dollars. If you put it this way, advertising is trading money for your attention. You're paying attention to the show. I accepting money from an advertiser and selling your attention for their product, to them for your product. They're trying to buy some of your time. Instead of that, why don't you just give your money directly to Blue 58 and the Power Sweep? Support that instead of supporting these other companies through your attention. That seems like a win-win to me, and wins across all fronts. And I want to take care of those of you who do that sort of thing too. So we've got bonus content in the pipeline every Friday, coming to Patreon and to Substack. We've got people who support at certain levels can get merchandise, and there's a level I can't go below via Patreon. Otherwise, I would do it for absolutely everybody. And then you just get to be a part of a cool community through our Discord server as well, if you choose to do that as well. But just am firmly anti-ads, and every bit of your support just continues to reinforce that position. It's just cool to show people that we can have a pretty big podcast without needing to rely on ads, because I think it's assumed that if you get to a certain point, you're just going to start running ads, and I'm just not going to do that. So if you want to be a part of that kind of operation, well, you know where to find us, patreon.com/thepowersweep or the powersweep.substack.com. Check it out. The schedule, it's out. Overall impressions, pretty good. Opponents don't really matter right now. We knew the opponents for a while. You can figure out who the Packers are going to play because the NFL is on a schedule rotation deal. You can have a pretty good idea year to year who the Packers are going to play. You know 6 games every year for sure from the NFC North. And right now, it doesn't really matter who the Packers have on their schedule anyway, because teams are going to change a lot before the Packers get to them. This is the ultimate version of it's not who you play, it's when you play them. Well, you're never playing anybody in the middle of May. So it doesn't matter who they're playing now. We'll see how things shape and change over the course of the season. The thing that really jumps out, if you look at how the schedule goes, is rest. It seems like a very favorable schedule in terms of the Packers' rest. They've only got 2 road games back-to-back at one point in the season, though in that stretch you also have 3 road games in 4 weeks. So maybe that's a fairly intense segment there. But overall, pretty strong situation for the Packers in terms of getting their rest, getting their bodies right, and even the Week 10 bye seems like a pretty close to optimal place. Now, your bye is always going to fall at a pretty good place for you. You're never going to not need your bye, but it seems a little bit more advantageous to have it toward the middle to back end portion of the schedule than at the very beginning. There was one year, I think it might have been 2021, maybe even earlier, but the Packers had like a Week 6 bye. Shoot, I think it was last year actually. They had a Week 6 bye, and conceivably the Packers could have played like after that. It ends up being like 15 straight games or 16 straight games before they have a break. If they had gone all the way to the playoffs, that's a long, long time. At least if you've got a bye toward the middle of the season, it's never going to be that long. Week 10 seems like a pretty good time to have it. So how do you talk about the schedule in a way that makes sense? I think to harken back to what we said in the intro, it seems a lot like a menu. A really, really big menu. So maybe you picture, and I don't have any music for this, but picture we're at a really high-end restaurant. We're going for a tasting menu. We're going for something really, really high-end. 18 courses, lots and lots to look at. What are all these dishes that are coming our way, and what order are we having them in? Let's talk through it. Week 1, the Packers are against the Eagles in Brazil, a primetime game. Beautiful appetizer here, something a little bit exotic. Does it really matter what this game is, how it turns out? Not really, because teams are going to change a lot after week one. But if you come out of the gate really strong with a really great appetizer here or a really great week one win, it's going to set the tone for the whole meal, the whole season, for what comes next. Unfortunately, in week two, we get the Colts at home meaning Lambeau Field, a noon kickoff. Okay, strong start with the appetizer potentially. This seems more like a salad course, a vegetable course. Really interesting appetizer. Then the chef comes out, okay, we're going to give you some greens here. Maybe not quite as exciting. There's a lot to like about every NFL team, sure, but the Colts are not one of the more exciting teams in the league this year. I'll admit, sometimes you do get a salad and you're like, oh, this is actually quite good. We had a fancy dinner with my wife's extended family last fall for her parents' 50th anniversary. That was the case there. Brought out the salads. Turns out this was a different kind of salad. This had an entire skewer of very well-cooked shrimp on top of it. Much more interesting than the salad itself, but they could still call it a salad course. Very, very interesting. Ended up being quite good. Maybe that's what the Colts game is like. Maybe we see something that we haven't seen before. I got to harken back to the line that my dad always used when I was doing play-by-play in college. You keep watching long enough, something interesting is going to happen. You never know. A given game can be wild and crazy, and even if you don't expect it, maybe the Packers against the Colts in week two ends up being some sort of classic game. Week three, kind of in the same boat. We're off to Tennessee to face the Titans, a noon kickoff. This seems like another course that maybe is just something you wouldn't normally order. This is the last time I'll refer to this, but same dinner with my wife's family last fall. The course after salads, stuffed portobello mushrooms. Now, I like mushrooms, like portobello mushrooms, but it's not something I would usually order for myself, but turned out to be pretty great. Maybe that's the Titans. Maybe that's heading to Tennessee. Not really a common opponent. Let's bring back the Mike McCarthy expression there. An uncommon opponent playing the Titans, but a potentially interesting one. And maybe we get an A.J. Dillon resurgence game. He can turn back the clock to 2020. We'll get some snow in late September or something like that to really bring back those memories of 2020. And maybe it'll turn out to be something really, really cool. You never know. But the Colts and Titans, I feel like, just sitting here in May, I mean, all football is good football, but these are not the games that you're really circling on the calendar. This is not something you're necessarily super excited about. But that changes in week four. Our first really interesting, maybe classic course, maybe like a mini slider or something like that. Noon kickoff game versus the Minnesota Vikings. First divisional game of the season. Going to be great football weather, late September, early October there. Going to be fantastic. Week four. That's the first game on the schedule other than the season kickoff that I really find myself being pretty excited about. Week 5 feels like we get a little bit of a break here. If you're looking at this, again, as a menu, maybe this is like a drink course, an afternoon date with the Rams in Los Angeles for Week 5. Really fancy cocktail. Now, the Rams aren't what they once were. Maybe this is a cocktail that was super trendy a couple years ago, but now isn't quite as popular. But you still like it. And I think given the connections between the Rams and the Packers, that's kind of where we're at here. The Rams aren't what they were during their Super Bowl window. They aren't necessarily, the trendiest team in the league anymore, but they're still very popular. They're still going to be interesting with Sean McVay and the entire operation going on there. I think it's going to be an interesting game, and this is where the schedule starts to heat up a little bit in the first half of the season. Week 6, we're back to Lambeau Field to face the Cardinals, a noon kickoff game. This is a dish where you're probably just looking for one very specific thing out of it. I think everybody's got food like that, things where you're just trying to get one specific flavor or taste or something like that. There's a pizza place or a pizza chain where we live called Marco's, and I like to get something called the Pepperoni Magnifico pizza from there. They've got what they call Old World pepperoni on there, essentially crunchy pepperoni. That doesn't sound appetizing when I say it out loud, but if you had it, you'd understand. That's kind of what I'm looking at here. So we follow up our cocktail with a little bit of, we'll just say, use my example, Old World pepperoni here because I'm looking for one very specific thing out of this Cardinals game. I want to see Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Jair Alexander. How are the Packers going to face off against one of the most exciting young rookies in this year's draft class? We'll find out Week 6 at Lambeau Field. Week 7, this is where we start to really get interesting in terms of storylines and stuff, because a noon kickoff versus the Texans at Lambeau Field, this is, if you're looking at this for the restaurant example, this would be the trendy dish that the place is known for. Because you've got C.J. Stroud versus Jordan Love. I'm a little bit surprised that something like this is appearing where it is on the schedule. If it's food, you're a little bit surprised at something this big and trendy coming in course number 7. The football translation for that is I'm a little bit surprised that this is a noon kickoff. These are two of the most exciting young quarterbacks, I think, in the NFL right now. The NFL wants to stick them in a noon kickoff here in Week 7. It seems like that would be something that you could really try to highlight. But they don't want to go that direction. Maybe things change a little bit by this point in the season, but we'll see how things shake out. Week 8, noon kickoff against the Jaguars in Jacksonville. Not a super exciting game, not a super exciting course here. Another vegetable thing here, not even a super interesting one. We'll see. Again, anything can be good, but this is not, one of those games that we're super excited about at this point. Week 9 is where I think things start to get interesting. And if you are clinging to the food metaphor here, which is probably a little bit played out, but I feel like I'm Weird Al in the phase of my career where he can only do food songs. But I've stuck with this metaphor, so we're going to keep doing it. This is the point where things start to get really interesting. We're in the meat of the schedule here, and you're in the meat of your tasting menu here. This is where things start to get a little bit wild and experimental. You're realizing at this point that you could go to any restaurant and get an appetizer or a salad or a couple little things or a cocktail or whatever. But this is where the restaurant should start to show what they can really do. And this stretch is where the Packers are going to have to show what they can really do, because the next month or 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks here, is where the season is really, I think, going to be determined, because starting with the Lions, you start to face some real contenders here. This is where things could get a little bit wild and experimental. I don't think any game against the Lions can be taken for granted anymore. The old Lions are gone. The contender Lions are here now. Whatever version of the Lions that they've been trying to become, this is that. This is who they've wanted to be. And they think they own the NFC North now, and this is the Packers' first opportunity to show them that may not be the case. Week 10, palate cleanser. Take a breath, and then it really kicks off. So the Lions start this with a little maybe mid-season appetizer for what's to come, but things really take off after the bye. Week 11, right out of the gate, we go to Chicago, take on the Bears at noon. Classic dish, classic matchup. A little bit disappointed it's taking us to get to Week 11 to get to the Bears. I always say that I'd like to have 2 things from the Packers-Bears rivalry every year. You need one game where it's just spectacularly beautiful football weather. So like early mid-November, afternoon kickoff, the sun is bright, the sky is blue, the clouds are white. It's just beautiful, beautiful football weather, perfect weather conditions. And then you need another game, and it doesn't matter which stadium these games take place, but you need one game per year where you play just under a slate gray sky. The field is like ashy green, gray, brown kind of. Maybe there's a little bit of sputtering precipitation in the air, but you need those 2 extremes in the Bears-Packers rivalry every year. And we need to soak up those games as much as we can, because the Bears are going to chicken out of playing outdoor football and put a roof on their stadium. Football needs to be played outside on grass. If you're playing it inside, you're playing something else. It's not football, and the Bears have decided they don't want to play football anymore. I think it's going to be the Packers' advantage at some point here to have the only outdoor stadium in the NFC North. It almost has to be. You just can't replicate playing football outside, and these teams are going to be playing so much indoor football. It almost has to be to the Packers' advantage. But Week 11, we get the Bears in Chicago, and then the schedule really starts going. Week 12, Packers get the 49ers at home, afternoon kickoff. I don't even have a food metaphor for this one. This is just going to be a good game, and this is an exciting 3-week stretch, because the very next week, the Packers get a Thanksgiving matchup against the Dolphins at home. I don't have the notes in front of me, but I think according to Packers.com, this is just the 3rd time in 101 years that the Packers are going to be playing at home on Thanksgiving. That's pretty cool. This is early dessert. very exciting. Thanksgiving, hopefully you're going to be having a little bit of dessert watching the Packers take on the Dolphins on Thanksgiving. That's pretty exciting. That'll be kind of fun, I think. It makes it a little bit of a pain from a podcast perspective to do something on a holiday, so maybe we don't end up doing something that day, but that's a very small complaint. It's fun to see the Packers in primetime, and we're going to get a lot of it starting with Thanksgiving, because the very next week the Packers are on Thursday Night Football again, playing at Detroit. Primetime matchup, maybe another play on your experimental thing that you did earlier prior to the palate cleanser in the middle of your menu. First it's one way, now it's another way. Either the Packers are going to have to beat the Lions twice in a row in this week, or they're going to have to get revenge for whatever happened against the Lions in Week 9. Maybe you took one at our place, we'll take one at your place. Maybe we defended our turf and we're going to come take one from you. Let's see what happens. The Packers-Lions stuff this year is going to be very exciting. Lions in new uniforms as well. Week 15, another primetime game. The Packers are traveling to Seattle to play the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football. Look, if we're going with a food analogy on this one, let's call it something that you've had before and had a bad experience with. I don't need to see any more Packers games in Seattle in primetime. I feel like I have seen all of that I care to see in my lifetime. If the Packers get flexed out of this game, I don't care. I don't care at all, because look, we don't need to revisit any specific games, but I think we can all agree there have been some bad memories of noteworthy games in Seattle. Let's leave it at that. Week 16, Packers in primetime again, 4 in a row here. Monday Night Football at home against the Saints. Okay, maybe the Saints are bringing something experimental and New Orleans-like up for the later portions of our tasting menu here. Maybe a deconstructed something or other, because Saints seem to have been deconstructing here for a while, pun very much intended. They're trying to figure out still what they are after Drew Brees, after Sean Payton. Sometimes it takes you a while, and maybe it really takes you until you get that next quarterback, and it doesn't feel like they're there yet. We'll see. Week 17, Packers, Vikings, noon, in Minnesota. Got to do this again, another Monday or another noon game against the Vikings. I don't really know what the Vikings are going to be this year, but I feel like by this point in the season, we ought to have a pretty good idea what they are and what direction they're headed in. Are the Vikings a team on the rise? Are they still going to be rebuilding by this point in the season? We're going to figure it out in Week 17 in Minnesota, potentially with the Packers looking for playoff seeding at that point. And then to land things, again with our food metaphor here, Week 18 against the Bears at Lambeau Field. Time TBD. We don't know if this is a Saturday kickoff. We don't know if this is a Sunday kickoff. We don't know if it's a noon kickoff, afternoon, prime time. We don't know. It's all a mystery. So just call it a dessert with a twist. And I think even if you don't like the Bears playing at Lambeau Field that late in the season, even if you don't want the Packers to be resting their starters Week 18 against the Bears, potentially giving them a season-ending loss at Lambeau Field, don't love the optics of that. There are parts of it that are nice this way. If it comes down to the Packers and the Bears contending for the NFC North title in Week 18 at Lambeau Field, that's a pretty good slice of dessert. That's a good ending to your 18-course meal here that we've got set to get kicked off here later in September. You can feel the excitement start to build. It starts to feel real when the schedule actually comes out. I am pretty averse to all the rumors, all the this is when this is happening, the trickle out of the NFL slowly announcing when games are going to be happen just is annoying to the point of almost being offensive. But once it's all out, once you get a look at the schedule and you can start saying, this is the shape of the season, this is what things are going to be like, or this is what we think is going to be the difficult stretch, then it starts to become pretty real. Then you start looking at the calendar and saying, shoot, as I record this, it's May 16th. 2 months-ish until training camp. It's not that far away. It's going to come pretty quickly. And we've got a lot of exciting stuff to look forward to. These 2024 Packers could be a pretty wild ride, wild in a good way. Now that we got a taste of what to expect from this era of Packers football, the bar is going up, and that is exactly where you want things to be. Now we've got a schedule, and pretty soon we're going to see how the Packers measure up to that schedule, and that is a really cool thing to look forward to. So I've got for you in this episode of Blue 58. I appreciate you tuning in. I'd appreciate it even more if you'd take a second and share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it. It's going to help more people find the show and get more people involved with this conversation you and I are having about the Green Bay Packers, which in turn is going to help all of us, me included, become smarter Packers fans. And as I always say, smarter Packers fans are better Packers fans, and better Packers fans are what we all want to be. I'm your host, John Meerdink. We'll see you next time on Blue 58.